Hi, I'm Gleaves Whitney. This is a continuation of my video essay, Less Pluribus, More Unum. Chapter 3, How Historical Developments in Europe Prepared the Way for Modern Diversity. Since the United States was settled by diverse peoples bearing tribal hatreds from Europe, the American experiment could easily have been smothered in the crib. What kept us from descending into a Hobbesian war of all against all? After all, the existential polarity that pulls us toward human solidarity on the one hand and pushes us into tribal attachments on the other can in no way be solved. Polarities just are. Tribalism is an inevitable fact of human nature, just as gravity is an inevitable fact of physical nature. Although tribalism cannot be solved, it can be blunted. Indeed, the solidarity tribal polarity in human nature has been softened by three historical developments. First, the diversity that characterized early modern Europe. Second, the culture that characterized early modern America. And third, the institutions our founders established. All three factors would fortuitously combine in the U.S. to aid Americans' search for common ground when they had the political and the social will to do so. Our nation's European origins baked diversity into the American melting pot. Historically, most civilizations have been controlled by hegemonic empires that enforced unity and did not tolerate rival civilizational paradigms. Egypt, Persia, India, China, and Byzantium illustrate how the marriage of the state and religion worked to stifle dissent and experimentation. Kings and priests were inseparable. Western civilization was different. Unusual among the world's civilizations, Europe never experienced a single nation dominating all the others. No single monarch ever ruled the whole continent. None had since the fall of Rome in the West in 476 CE. Charlemagne, Napoleon, Hitler all tried but failed to corral Europe into one great empire. Moreover, church and state were often competitors rather than mutually reinforcing. So authority in Western Europe was dispersed. In some locales, the church had more power than the state. In others, the state had more power than the church. In some regions, the prince had more power than the towns. In others, the towns had more power than the prince. France had its unified monarch. Italy had its republican communes. Germany had its scores of kingdoms, princedoms, and duchies. The variety was astonishing on a scale unlike anything else in the world. As a result of these different polities, all competing with one another, Europe became a laboratory of extraordinarily diverse religious, philosophical, social, political, and economic experiments. Risk-takers and boundary transgressors could get away with challenging the status quo to a degree unthinkable elsewhere. If rebels felt threatened in one princedom, they could flee to another. Think, for example, of the most famous Reformation cleric, Martin Luther, or the most famous Enlightenment writer, Voltaire. Both took aim at the status quo, and when subsequently threatened, they fled their home and found refuge with a more accommodating prince. Now, we cannot quit this review of Europe's development without mentioning some of its greatest risk-takers of all. Christian humanists. Christian humanists came in all varieties, but what united them was their mastery of a stunning variety of ideas that had circulated since antiquity. It is no exaggeration that their scholarship helped shape the liberality of Western thought. Page after page of European intellectual history tells of how the Christian humanists set out on the improbable quest to perfect the reconciliation between pagan Athens and Christian Rome. Their quest to reconcile these rival ideas, movements, and civilizational paradigms was radical for its time, and no less dangerous than had they set out in search of the Holy Grail. Among the dangers the Christian humanists faced were censure and trashing of their reputation. Thomas Aquinas was one such pioneering humanist. He dared greatly when he wrote Summas that challenged the status quo in his church. He dared to build civilizational bridges from Aristotle's Athens to Peter and Paul's Rome. Even after his death, his work was viewed askance by the church hierarchy. But eventually it was adopted, and it established rigorous methods for finding common ground between seemingly polar civilizational systems. The Renaissance, the great age of Christian humanism, was a happier time for civilizational bridge building. One of the greatest humanists was Marsilio Ficino, the philosopher-priest whose Florentine academy reconciled Plato with Jesus. Ficino's quest brought to the surface what was always latent in Christendom and feared by many. He and fellow Renaissance humanists permanently changed the character of the West by legitimizing a civilizational authority that rivaled the authority of the Church. Henceforward, pagan heroes were esteemed as highly as Christian saints. Cicero equaled Bede. Laboring to build strong bridges between these rival authorities, the Christian humanists made respectable the quest to seek common ground with the other. Again, all this bridge building originated with Catholic priests. Like the Renaissance, the Reformation had an incalculable impact on civilizational authority in the West. Leading Protestant reformers, rigorously trained in the methods of Christian humanism, came to the conclusion that Rome had corrupted the original church. As a result, they were emboldened to raise up a profusion of rivals to Catholic Rome. Lutherans, Calvinists, Anabaptists, Anglicans, Unitarians, together they would change the historic trajectory of the West and America's civic ecology with it. The Protestant reformers' radical leap was merely a continuation of the step previously taken in the Renaissance, when humanists raised up a civilizational authority to rival that of Rome. The creation of strong civilizational rivalries, in essence, connected the Renaissance and Reformation. Throughout the early modern period, we see again and again how Europe's elites launched revolutions that were at first resisted and then embraced. The point of all these developments is this: without intending to, Christendom evolved into the freest civilization on earth. Out of the West's liberality, there would grow a tolerance for ambiguity. No one person, no single institution, no lone culture was seen as possessing apodictic truth. Loyalties would have to be earned by persuasion, the predicate to finding common ground. That concludes Chapter 3 of my video essay, Less Pluribus, More Unum. I invite you to watch Chapter 4. Thanks for dropping in.